Do you know the history of Helene Hadsell's famous SPEC method? Select it, project it, expect it, collect it. My name's Carolyn, and I've been blessed with maintaining Helene Hadsell's legacy. And I kind of knew this in the back of my mind, that she never actually won any prizes using SPEC. But as I was working on the Spanish edition of the Name It and Claim It game, I found an old podcast interview with her online, and I was listening to it, and I realized I should probably remind people of this because I had forgotten it. She didn't actually develop SPEC until 2009. So let's go through the history, because that's what I want to talk about today, is the history of SPEC. Back in 1971, so I've got all the copies of her editions here. So this is what her book looked like in 1971, the Name It and Claim It game, Maneuvers for Witchcraft. And there's the back. Look at Helene. This is very old. And this one's actually falling apart. This one is, like I said, 71, but this is the third printing. So this was from 74. And you'll notice here, it's by Helene Hadsell. There's a whole story about how she added the E. And I don't know when she added it, but I found some of her workbooks that were Helene Hadsell, and she went in and she put the E. And I did an interview with Sarah Jordan, who's also a numerologist, and did the numbers, because I thought, you know what? Helene doesn't just do something for doing something. She added the E because it would change her numerology. So you'll have to go and watch that video separately. But that's why you'll see the name change from Helen to Helene. And I chose to honor her decision to change it. I never saw any paperwork that was left in what was remains of her paperwork that she legally changed it. I don't actually know. I did find I thought this was kind of funny. So her middle name, I believe, was Barbara. So it's Helen Barbara Hadsell. And she called herself Helene Hadsell. Well, I found a plaque from the Silva organization honoring her for being a great contributor at one of the conventions. I think it was 1993. And so the plaque is actually Helen E. Hadsell. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. Someone, I guess, knew her as Helen. Didn't realize she changed it to Helene, just assumed it was her middle initial, and created the plaque that way. I'll have to take a picture and put it on Instagram. Anyway, so this book came out, and it only had, several chapters. You can see the book is quite thin, right? The font's quite small. And I did a video on the missing chapter on this book, and we'll discuss that. You can go watch that video about why I didn't include it in my copy of the Name It and Claim It game, because I didn't know it until after I had even recorded the Audible book. But this book, she only has Maneuvers for Witchcraft. So I did a blog on this, so you can go and read it. And you will see at the end of Maneuvers for Witchcraft, it says, the end of my book, the beginning for a new way of life for you. Of course, maybe I can see it. Let's see if I can get it up to the camera. Okay, that's better. That is how she ended the Maneuvers for Witchcraft chapter. So in here, she did have a 3-step manifestation method. Now let's see if anybody knows what it is. It is in the Name It and Claim It game chapter. appropriately titled. So step number 1, set a goal. Now, these don't change in any of the editions. Step 2, is to don't hold any doubts, right? There is no failure, only a delay in results. And the third one, step number 3, you can con yourself into anything. So those are the 3 specific ones. Now, some things did change a little bit from version to version. Like in this edition, she talks about which contest newsletter she subscribes to. Well, by the time she did the 88 version, she had stopped contesting, or it had petered down quite a bit. So things like that were taken out. And actually, I don't even know if by then that newsletter was still around. Currently, the longest standing sweepstakes newsletter is Sweepsheet. They just had, oh no, is it 33 or 34 anniversary? I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember. So what she did here, so this one was published by the Divorce. I know what a not a great publishing company name, but it's spelled, I believe that's Dutch. I could be wrong, but it's spelled like that. And they're still in existence because I did contact them regarding this edition, and I couldn't get any copies, but they were the publishers of this. Okay, then the Name It and Claim It game by Helene. This is the 1988 version that my husband had bought me. It has now been destroyed because we had to scan all the pictures inside for the book I was doing because there were no records of the pictures. So we scanned them, vectorized them, cleaned them up, and republished them. So it was the only way I was going to get the pictures in. So it broke my heart to break this. I did get another clean copy when I visited Tag Powell earlier this year. Now, Tag Powell, this is an interesting story, and I don't know when she met Tag, but Tag was a Silva instructor, and Tag was also a publisher. So when she went to republish this edition, or I guess he had talked to her about it and said, hey, let's reprint it, I guess when her contract with the Divorce company had expired, they republished it. So you'll notice that this was done by Top of the Mountain Publishing in Florida. And so what they did was, if you look at here, this is part 1. And this is this whole book, the part 1. I don't know, can I get everything on screen and maybe a little bit of me? So part 1 is all of her original Name It and Claim It. But you can see it's much thicker. So what did they do different? So she started adding more stories like 8 years later. But this 8 years later, when they published in 88, would have been from 80. So they may have published more editions up until 1980. I don't have any of them. I've never seen them. So I don't know how many runs they made. Now, what we do is everything's print on demand. I put something on Amazon. It's print on demand. It's on Kindle. You just download it. I did Audible. You just download it. There's no print run to worry about. There's no, hey, we only printed 5,000 copies. That's all there is. All the bookstores have to order them. There's none of that. There's no carrying inventory. There's not. If you want a copy, you can buy a copy. There's no shortage of inventory. It's kind of cool this way, actually. Anyway, so this is 8 years later. And then she goes in to talk about all the different things because she had a lot of questions about how she did things. So she integrated more stories of different ways and different techniques you could use to be a winner, like keys to winning. How the right attitude makes a winner. I mean, these are really important chapters. The one I think is the most important that she added was the difference between desire and knowing. how she really knew she was going to win. And I've had that knowing a few times. I remember entering, this is dating myself, a mail-in sweepstakes. I remember finding it, and there was only 2 days left that I could mail in. And it's had to be maybe, I'm going to say 08 or 09. I don't know if I remember, around there. And I remember thinking, I was filling out the 4 entries, and I remember thinking, yeah, we're winning this. I just kind of knew before I even mailed them off. And I remember being on my way to Toastmasters, because I used to go to the Wednesday night meetings in my town. And my husband called me and said, hey, I just got notified we won a trip. And I'm like, yeah, I knew that. And it was to the craziest place. It was to the Memorial Cup, which is like the Stanley Cup for the, not OHL. It's the league just below the NHL. So I might have got that wrong. But it's that league. And it's kind of like a farm, where the farm teams are for the hockeys, Major League Hockey. And so we went to Rimouski, Quebec, because that's where it was being held that year. I've tried to win it other years, because it was in Saskatoon and other places that I'd never been. So that's the furthest east I've been in Canada, was when I won that trip to Rimouski, Quebec. So that's a very important chapter in here. And so I think these things kind of led her to SPEC. There was a point to why I'm telling you this. I think these are points. And then she has also the general contesty stuff. So she didn't have as many, like, here's what you do to enter sweepstakes. I mean, that's what my books were about. Like I did, how to win cash cards, trips, and more. That's pretty step by step. Here's what they are. Here's where you find them. Here's what you do. Here's how you organize them. Here's some other things you can do to win. Here's how you win on social media. Like, it's literally, here's what you can look for, how to look out for scam, like literally how to, or what I do. And then I threw in a chapter on attracting luck, because I did get asked that so much. Her book is kind of like an attracting luck book with a little bit of sweepstakes thrown in. We're kind of the opposite. So it's really good to review the chapters, especially. So the big one, Between Desire and Knowing, which is really what I think mucks people up about SPEC, is they're really anxious about winning, and knowing is a calm, cool assurance. And she could get herself into that knowing state, which was the expected. So at the end of, so she had changed this book. So you'll see what chapter 9 is, Maneuvers for Witchcraft. At the end of chapter 9, she had started creating SPEC, because it says select it, project it, expect it. The Secret had not come out yet. The movie The Secret. It was like 10 years away. So this was like a 3-step. So it was another 3-step manifesting technique. So the first one was set a goal. So it's the same as select it, because how are you going to know what you're going to get if you don't know what you want? You have to pick something, whatever your goal is, whether it's a new job, better health, more finances, romance, whatever it is, whatever your goal is, write a book. Any goal that you set for yourself, whatever that is. So you're selecting it. Then she had never have any doubts, which was kind of a leap forward, because that's really the expected. And then con yourself into anything was basically reprogramming your subconscious mind to believe that whatever you were telling it was going to be true. Okay, so that was the kind of the structure of the first one. Then the structure of the second one, select it, same. Project it is, I up here. It's thinking, it's projecting it out. You're visualizing it. You could journal it. You can make a vision board. You could turn it into an affirmation. You can do her card method where she would write one word for each goal and put it wherever she was going to see it, like the kitchen, the bathroom, in her car, above her desk. She would make a bunch of them, and so she would see it every day. Hey, I want to win this, 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 and this, or whatever the goals are. I did it the year that I read. One year I was reading this book. I think it was when I got this edition. We'll talk about this one in a minute. And I did that, and I wrote them out, and I put London on there because I wanted to go to the UK, and I won a trip to London. So that was pretty cool that one came to fruition because I was really focused on it. So this one came out at 88. And again, in the, I don't want to say olden days because it's not that long ago and I was still fairly young. The printing processes and the technology available for creating books has changed tremendously. But when this went out of print, again, they stopped printing them. I don't know what happened with her and Tag, if they lost touch, because she never talked about him. Not that I've heard. She talked about Jose. She never wrote about Tag in any of her books. Nothing. And so she started printing it up for herself at home. And this makes me giggle because basically, and these look like they're photocopies of copies. Like it's really faded, like print wise. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. The camera's pretty good, but it looks like this is a photocopy. Like she has a master and she's made a couple of copies because it looks a little, let me see if I can find a good page with a, yeah, you can see maybe it's a little, this is a good example of the slightly faded. You can see that the printing isn't, the toner isn't completely even across the whole page. So she basically, this is the same as like an 8.5 by 11 and she just sliced it. And then she had a Surlocks machine at home. That's what makes me giggle. And then at the back, so how she would sell these books is she would have, you know, a little bit of promotion. So there's In Contact with Other Realms. And here's how you could order it. You could just mail her $12. And then there's a little bit about her on the back. And the price was $12. I just think it was so funny. Now, this one's very dear to me because it's autographed. And I just love it. I have another one, and it's got so many tabs in it because everything was just hilarious. Now, again, when you go through this one, this is basically this book printed at home with Select It, Project It, Expect It. Now, she did add a couple of chapters. She did add a chapter in here about an update, so anything that was different in any of the editions, I added it in. Now, that's why I did a video on the missing chapter, because I didn't get a copy of these. These are very rare and hard to find. And I had an alert on thrift books. And finally, one day when one came in, I got the alert and I immediately went and bought it. Right? So I didn't know that I was missing a chapter because I was basing it off this, and the digital copy that Dyke had sent me. So I have a 2010 digital edition, which I can't show you. It's on a CD. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, I could hold up, you know, any CD, and that doesn't tell anybody anything. It doesn't tell anybody anything. So that's what I did. I merged the three editions together that I had. Now, the 2010 edition that I had the SPEC chapter, but she also was not very techy. Dyke was telling me she was always forever calling him and saying she needed help in the computer. And if you go to my Instagram, I just found a picture of Helene with her daughter-in-law, Fiona. I found 2 pictures, and they're priceless. I don't have a year on them, but I'm going to guess the 90s based on the computer monitor on her desk. It's one of those huge honking ones that's like, this thick and this wide. And yeah, so, and she wasn't super techy. She added the SPEC chapter in. She just literally plunked it in the book. Because when I went through the file of the 2010 edition, like, she was updating this book to the year she passed away. Like, this woman was amazing. And because she was always wanting to help people. Like, that's why I have the affirmation at the front of the book, because her goal was to always, always, always help people to help themselves. That's how she went about teaching. And so she wanted to keep improving the book, which I think is really noble, because she wanted to make sure that everybody got every bit of knowledge that she could impart to help them live a better life. I mean, that's fantastic, right? So she had just plunked it in. And when I'm editing the book, I'm like, no, and she had changed, but on the 2010 edition, it did say select it, project it, expect it, collect it. And then she had a different chapter. I'm like, no, you have to put the SPEC chapter right after you say select it, project it, expect it, collect it. You turn the page and it's SPEC. Like, it only made sense. But she didn't know how to do that. And again, she was updating it in 2010 on the computers and the technology that was handy at the day without super good technical skills. And I'm editing now. I started doing it in 2020. So basically 10 years later, with brand new equipment and today's software, I mean, night and day. I can literally just, copy a chapter and like plunk it where I need it and then reformat the page. If you're using any kind of, software, you know exactly what I mean, because you've seen the evolution yourself. And so I had forgotten, because I'd been working with this stuff for so long, I had completely forgotten that SPEC wasn't part of the equation, because when Mind Valley, it was Finer Minds then, and Vishen Lakhani and his team went out to see Helene. If you've seen any of the videos, they talk about SPEC and how she won all these contests. Well, and she used the Silva method. Well, the problem is, yes, she did win all the contests. I mean, there was pictures and adventures, and Dyke, who's still here, can attest to the stories. Yeah, she did win all the prizes, but she didn't meet Jose Silva until months after she won the house. And she didn't create SPEC until 2009, just before she met that team. And the reason she created SPEC, or she updated her second 3-part manifesting method, was because, if you remember, if you're around at that time, the U.S. especially was going through a depression. Like, it was a recession/depression. And it was really bad for a lot of people. And she was tired of the doom and gloom on the news. And she wrote an article called SPEC for a newspaper called The Sun, the U.S. Sun. And she wanted to uplift people. So she sent it off to the editor and said, hey, I hope you will, publish this, because there's so much doom and gloom. And a couple of days later, they emailed her back and said, yeah, this would be great. And so they asked her for a picture, for the paper, and they published her SPEC article. which, she'd hoped. And so that's how it got attached to it. But I think what I also figured out is that so one of the questions I get a lot from people is they get stuck with SPEC. They're projecting and they're expecting and the thing doesn't show up. And I said, well, that's the problem because you're trying. It's one of those paradoxes that when you are living in the end result and you're not trying, you are just doing. So select it is pick a goal. Project it tends to be up here. Expect it is down here in your heart where you feel it. I also recommend that people maybe go read some Neville Goddard, who's very good with the law of assumption, which is that part of her SPEC. Also, Joe Vitale does a lot of work on that. Plus, he wrote a book on Ho'oponopono. Oh, I hope I pronounced that right. Called Zero Limits. That's also very good. And I highly recommend that book for people if you're looking for something to explain how when you work on what's out inside, you see what's outside. So that's why expecting comes from here and not out there. And then collect it. So there's two things that I talk to people about because the first two parts everybody seems to have those down pat. E, expect it because it rhymes. Select it, project it, expect it, collect it. E should actually stand for energy because Helene kind of trips up on some of her words in one spot where I realized, because she said, I would project towards the goal and give it more energy to make it manifest. That's the E part, but she's using the word project again, which is where I think people get tripped up. So project, say it's up here. You're thinking, you're visualizing, you have your goal. You can see it. And then E is when you're, I know I don't like using the word, but I can't think of a better word. If someone can think of a better word, let me know. Project the energy towards it. So it's expecting, but that's what she talked about during one of her stories where she talks about going to the Christmas party, and it was the person that projected the most energy was the one that won the prize. And then when everybody saw them at the party and said, well, we're not going to enter because the Hadsells are here, they just gave them all their energy on top. And Helene's like, I didn't even have to project for it because everybody gave me their energy. It could almost stand for energize it, but that doesn't rhyme. Right? It's fun because it doesn't rhyme. And then collect it, which you'd think would be easy, but that's the allowing part. And how comfortable are you allowing things into your life? So I always ask people this one, how easy can you receive a compliment? And if you can't accept compliments easily, then how are you expecting collecting the bigger things to come into your life? Try even incrementally receiving, like today or this week, I'm going to allow, so many good things to come in, and you just you're going to turn the tap. You're going to open the faucet for allowing, right? The flow is going to get bigger and stronger as you turn that tap to allowing. And I want you to try that. That's what I want you to try for like a week. Play with it. Again, this is what people forget. It's in the title. This part right here. It is a game, right? If you play games, like if, you got family game night, everybody's expecting to win. Everybody's having a ball. You try your best. You laugh a lot. You eat some pretzels, drink some soda, maybe some popcorn, have fun, connect. You're in the present moment. That's how you should be playing life. play with it, have fun with it, and see what shows up, because things will happen that you will not expect to get to your goal. So Mike Dooley's famous for saying this: the how is the domain of the universe. Because people also get caught up in, well, how is it going to happen? Well, it doesn't matter how it's going to happen. Just focus on the end result and watch it unfold. So look, I got my SPEC sticker on my mug. It doesn't matter how it's going to unfold. So how the book is all laid out now is there's 4 parts. So these follow the format that Tag had set out. So there's part 1, which you'll notice now does not end at Maneuvers for Witchcraft. It ends at SPEC. Haha. And then part 2, now I changed some things. Like she called it 8 years later, but it was really an introduction to the next section of her life. So I changed some titles to make the flow of the book make a little more sense. Part 1 is introduction to, okay. And then there's part 3. Right? We split the last section up based on the different types of things. And then part 4 is all the additional stuff. I don't know. That's a little clearer. Is all the additional stuff. Things she had stuck in the book, things she referred to, like she referred to the desiderata. Well, she refers to it in the book, and I thought, well, people are going to want to know what that is. Like she refers to it several times. And I thought, So I stuck it in. What specifically prompted her in 2009 to come up with SPEC or expand on her method? I'm not quite sure. Maybe she had an intuition. Or by then she had written, wrong way, Confessions of an 83-Year-Old Sage. She would have coffee in the morning or a cup of tea and some breakfast, and she would sit in her favorite easy chair, and she would start to reminisce and get ideas and be prompted to write things down. So maybe in the same vein that she wrote Confessions of an 83-Year-Old Sage, she came up with SPEC. And it was the only thing she wrote. She wrote a bunch of other stories and things. After I get through publishing all the current stuff that's on my plate, I plan to go through all of her files again, find all the stories, either in paper or digitized, that have not really been released to the public. She might have, shared them with somebody or posted an article somewhere, but they're really, for the most part, gone. And publish them in a book. My working title is The Musings of Helene Hadsell, but that doesn't really cut it. But you get the idea. So it's going to be a compilation of all those missing stories. And some of them are quite good. And she learned quite young. And I think this is why she was so good at manifesting, because when she was really young, she, if you've read In Contact with Other Realms, no, I did it again. When you read In Contact with Other Realms, her first chapter talks about being 6 and seeing into the 4th dimension. Already, right off the bat, she was extremely intuitive. I think what happened was, and there are articles that she was entering at first, but I think once she read Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking, it really clicked for her. And she's like, I know how to do this. I know how to live in the end result, because she had done it before when she's little. There's a great story about red shoes, how she really wanted red shoes. She was maybe 7. And she really wanted red shoes for school because it was, time for all the kids to get new shoes. And they looked and there were no red shoes. And so her dad took her to this and he said, don't worry, just envision red shoes. Just see yourself with the red shoes. And he took her to the sales section of the clearance section of the shoe store, and they had all these white shoes, and he found her size. He said, find some that are comfortable. And she's like, okay. And she's doubt, like, how are these going to be my red shoes? And then he took her to the shoe store, the shoe repairman, and said, dye these as red as you can. And she had her red shoes because her dad was clever. But she also learned that if she just focused on the end result, so she knew that from a child. And I think a lot of us, including me, aren't used to practicing with that muscle. And so we find it hard. It's like going to the gym. If you decide you're going to lift weights, you're not going in there and saying to the guy, hey, put 300 pounds on this. I'm just going to start. No, you go in and you go, can I have 10 pounds, please? Right? You start really slow until you build up those muscles. Right? So it's the same thing with manifesting. Select it, project it, expect it, collect it. Start off with the 10-pound bell bar and build up. So as you get stronger, that's why people find it easier to manifest a free cup of coffee. Or there's a famous example of a blue feather. I can't remember the author of the book, but he teaches people to do that example. And it's a very famous example of, focusing on a blue feather, and you find a feather, and then but people, because there's no attachment and we haven't put stories around those items, they're really easy to manifest. But if I said to you, I want you to manifest $1 million house, you'd be like, because you have all kinds of stories. But manifesting $1 million house should be as easy as a cup of coffee. And because of our stories and our programming, we really get stuck. That's why it even took Helene a long time to figure out how to verbalize these different things. Because as we get older and try different things and learn new things, because she learned right up until she was reading books and learning new things right up until she passed away. She did not stop. She has a points to ponder. And no, I was going to do it. No, that one. Actually, it's in both. Points to ponder, which is her interpretation of the Sanskrit rules to being human. They were found on tablets, and it's called the Rules to Being Human. And one of the points is if you are here on earth, there's a lesson to be learned. You don't stop learning as long as you're here. And so she never did. And she also never stopped teaching, which is why things that she taught evolved over time, because we evolve over time. And we have experiences and we learn, and then we can take that knowledge and experience and impart it on others so that it becomes like a recipe book, right? If you want to bake a chocolate cake, you don't have to figure it out. You can go, someone has worked on it and figured it out. And you go and you open the recipe book and you follow the instructions. And if you follow them to the T, guess what? You're going to have a beautiful chocolate cake at the end. And it's the same thing. If you approached SPEC, right, with as much confidence as you would baking a chocolate cake, you'd be amazed at what shows up, right? And it also depends on where you put your energy. I had somebody frustrated with me right now because they said, well, why aren't you winning the lottery? And I said, because my focus is on getting books out right now. That's where I'm putting all my energy. I decided that enough of this one book a year business, I was going to just start getting them out there because I've now figured out a system, and I'm also getting other people to help me. And I'm putting out different formats of books. And my goal is to do 5 books in 5 months, which sounds a little bit crazy, but I'm on track because I've decided, I've selected it, I've projected it, I'm fully expecting to meet my goal, and I am collecting it as I go along. I've already got 1 Audible out. I'm almost finished the Spanish edition. I'm going to be putting out a booklet. I'm almost finished in Contact with Other Realms for Audible, the other audiobook. I'm going to be putting out one of Tag's books, and I'm putting out another book. Actually, that might be 6. 5+. Let's just go 5+. Right? Because I want to get all this information out to the public as soon as possible. And there's no point in me sitting on it if I can, do a workbook while I'm recording the audiobook. There's no reason I can't do both. And I have figured that out. So that's what I'm doing. So that's where I'm focusing my energy. And it's working because that's what I'm doing. Every time I start to get distracted and I want to go do something else because, oh my gosh, this thing right here, right? Whose phone isn't a wonderful distraction, right? Every time I get distracted, I'm like, ooh, what's that I love my TikTok, right? And it's easy to get lost in there. You look up, ooh, half an hour went by. I just wasted half an hour, right? I could have been writing for half an hour. So I've learned as soon as I start to drift and get distracted, no, come back. That's okay. You watch 3, come back and refocus. Because I said, I'm speccing this. And it's a good tip. Just keep coming back. So here's what I want you to. So that's how Helene went about her journey and how she kept changing it as she went along, because she kept growing as a person and learning. And thankfully, I was able to make sure that, I actually think her and I had a soul contract, because when I phoned her, when I had her on my radio show, I had a podcast before. It was cool. I wish I would have kept it up, but my life went in a different direction at that point. I said to her off air, hey, I would love to have you on it. Like, I'd like to come visit you. And she said no. And then she called again. She was highly intuitive, called me back 3 days later and said, your spirit guides are so loud, you better come. And I think she realized then the reason they were so loud in her ear was that her family, her grandchildren particularly, were not going to maintain her legacy. And if she didn't hand that baton off to somebody, it was going to die with her. And because I was also an author and I had written contest books, sweepstakes books, so I understood the hobby, I could easily take over the Name It and Claim It game, because that was winning. It was about winning. It was about writing. It was about, and I had my law of attraction chapter in the book. So she knew I loved all that stuff, because at that point, The Secret had come out. And she knew I would be able to keep it going. And then my life took a nosedive and it sat. And thankfully, I didn't let it sit too long. I was able to, Dyke was still with us, and I was able to get the rights to her work and make sure that everybody can enjoy it in a myriad of formats. And now languages coming up to spread her work further. And I'm just going to keep going with all her books, and then Tag's books and Judith's books. And I'm turning into a publisher, like a fearsome publishing house, to help everybody live their best life. And that's what I put in here, right? How to be a winner in contests and life. Because really, you want to win in all areas of your life, not just the prizes. Although the prizes are a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. Helene won trips. I won trips. Trust me. It's so much fun to go on a trip that you've won. But anyway, I don't see any questions about the history of SPEC and how it took a long time. I also have this as a blog post for people, so you can go and actually read it yourself. And then, as I stated, I didn't have one of these books. So you can go watch my missing chapter video. And if you go to the missing chapter blog, you can go down. So if you've got my edition of the Name It and Claim It game with all the extras, go download the missing chapter for free. It's on my website, and we had it. Oh, I can do a whole video on this one. This is the number one question that Helene got and that I get. Now, the answer is yes. Okay, you can win the lottery with SPEC. So if you go to Words for Winning, you will find there is a blog post and a video on how to win the lottery using SPEC. So Helene has, there's 3 blog posts and 1 video. So how that came about was in this edition, well, actually in starting from this edition, she had a section on drawing money to you and then how to win the lottery. Now, even when she wrote this edition, this was in 88, the lottery, she lived in Texas. The state of Texas didn't have a state lottery until 1992. So 4 years after this was written. So she said, I've never had an experience with it because first of all, she won everything she ever wanted. So why would she need to win the lottery? Because most people want to win the lottery to go get all the things they want. But if you already have them from just speccing them, then what do you care? So she didn't focus on the money. She focused on the end result, which, a lot of people say, well, I want to win the money so I can get the house. Well, then just focus on the house. Or I want to win the money so I can get the car. Well, just focus on the car. Like, skip the middleman, right? That's what she did. But she said she would focus on things that were important to her because everything was energy. So she would pick numbers that were important, like her children's birth dates or, her house number. Something that had significance were the numbers she would pick. When I was in Texas, I found a bunch of old diskettes and files. So I brought them all, which is where I think at some point I can write another book because I found enough stuff. Unfortunately, about half the diskettes were damaged beyond repair and I couldn't get the data off them. Some of them couldn't even be read. However, I did find one article digitized and it was about how she was teaching, I don't have a year. And someone asked that exact question. How can I win the lottery? And she said, well, everything's energy. So let's see which numbers are getting the most energy. So she started on the board. Okay, who plays number 1? Who plays number 2? Who plays number 3? Right? They went through all the numbers. And then the numbers that had the most people playing them, where she said those are the numbers that get the most energy. So some woman at that conference or workshop or whatever it was went out to 7-Eleven and bought a ticket with those numbers. She did not win the grand prize, but she won $25,000. So she was really happy. Right? Because everybody in that room was giving those numbers energy. And she's like, well, I'm going to go claim that energy. It's amazing to me that after somebody asked that question and she did that exercise, that somebody else didn't also do the same thing. Right? So part of it, which is kind of left out of all these equations of manifesting, is taking inspired action. Right? You can't just sit and wish you get a job. Polish your resume, update your LinkedIn, start asking people who they know. Does anybody, I'm looking for a job. See if someone will help you polish your resume. Maybe start, checking out job board. Like, you can't just sit and hope it shows up. You have to take action in the direction of your dreams, right? I remember years ago, at one point, someone, I did consulting for a long time too, while I was being an author. And so I was interviewing for this consulting position. I think it had to be, I don't know, maybe it was actually 2010. It was a long time ago. And I brought a copy of my book. I was really proud of it. And someone the interviewer made a comment. Like, he said, the book didn't write itself. Like, how much work do you think I put into this? Like, it didn't just manifest. Like, it didn't show up. I actually sat and researched and wrote. So you have to take inspired action, right? So what are your favorite numbers? Are you giving them energy? Are you doing quick picks? What are you doing to manifest. And why do you want to win? This is another question she doesn't ask. Why do you want to win? Okay. A lot of times, okay, the stat is 73% of lottery winners lose their money in the first 5 years because it is like a lightning bolt of energy. Because again, money's energy. It's like a lightning bolt of energy through your system. If your system isn't prepared to handle it, it will fry it out. So ask yourself, why do I want the money? And who's doing the asking? Is it your wounded inner child? Are you using it? You think, oh, I'm going to feel better if I have this money. And that's the paradox. You feel better, and then the money will show up. Okay? So this is, grab yourself a nice journal, right? This is the one I'm using for my Silva. I'm becoming a Silva instructor. I help out at the Silva trainings like Helene did, and I'm becoming a Silva instructor like Tag did. Anyway, part of becoming a Silva instructor is journaling. And this is my Silva journal. Nice, big, thick journal. I've bought some beautiful ones from the dollar store. You don't need anything. Start sitting down and looking at why you want to win and what are your goals, and set it out like that. So that's what I'd say. Nancy asks, what's the best way to get started in SPEC? Oh, no, sorry, wrong question. She also said, what's the best way to start manifesting? So actually, I kind of just answered it. Get yourself a nice journal and start writing out your goals. Like, what if your life could look like the way you want it? If you could have your dream life, what would it look like? And sit and start to write that out. Now, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be smooth. If you read the Name It and Claim It game or any of the other books, you will know that Helene at one point, they thought she had cancer. She didn't, spoiler alert. But she still had to go through that experience. She had a car accident where her face was smashed. If you look at pictures of her from before, like you can see here, it's kind of hard to see, right? It's kind of hard to see because it's so old and small, but you can see her face has a different proportion because her whole front, and then again, this happened in like 66. So the medical techniques for facial reconstruction weren't the same as they are now. So her face changed. It became wider and more pressed in a little. If you see pictures of her after, it completely changed the way she looked, that accident, right? She had some pretty funky things happen to her in her life. Her life was not smooth. Life is never smooth. But you can still have your dream life and enjoy every minute of it, and know that even things that we label as bad are always for our highest good, right? Think about it. She had that experience and she writes about it, and we can all learn from it. How many people have learned from that experience of her? So many people. It's amazing, right? So, okay. So Lux says, my husband wanted a watch, has for a year. One day I got it for him and wanted to hand it to him on his birthday, which was tonight. Is it possible to make someone else's manifestation come true because he wanted it and took no action, but he got it tonight? He did take action. How did you know he wanted that watch? And there's also something called thought forms. Okay, so I'm going to tell you this story. So she talks about how thought forms float. So I'm losing track of time. The year before. So Christmas 21. So this book had been out for almost 2 years, right? And I had been that's when I was working on Confessions of an 83-Year-Old Sage, and she talks about thought forms. So I had some smaller diamond earrings by my ex, and I thought, you know what? I want something to replace them by George, my boyfriend. We've been together 6 years now. So every time we went to Costco, they had these beautiful morganite earrings, beautiful stones. They're kind of apricot color. Nice size. I thought, That's good. So every time I could think about it, just like Helene did, I thought, I just envisioned these earrings on my ears, beautiful. I kept saying in my head, sending him little like text messages. George, get me those Morganite earrings at Costco. Get me those Morganite earrings at Costco. Kind of like, I thought I'm going to try her technique out. Well, Christmas morning comes and I open one of my gifts and it is a printer cartridge box. I'm like, So I opened it up and inside there was some kitchen stuff like a big whisk and some other stuff. So it was long, so it fit kind of in the box. And then at the bottom, there was a little jewelry box. And I opened it up and I thought, there's no way I'm getting these Morganite earrings. And I opened it up and I just about fell over because they weren't Morganite earrings. I don't know if you can see them, but they are diamond earrings. And I'm like, what? So don't worry about the how. And you could manifest something better than you think. But he's probably been thinking about that watch and he took action because he's interested in that watch and he might have tried it on in the store. So he took action. It doesn't have to be the way you think it does. Does that make sense? And yes, Robert Ohata, who's one of my favorite teachers, always says, act as if you're the answer to someone else's prayer. That's a pretty powerful quote. Yeah, so Lux says, he was looking at the watch online for a while he showed me and told me he wanted it. And that's when I had the idea to get for him. So basically, he sent you a thought form. It was overwhelmed with the good emotions. There you go. Yes, he thought about it. He set his goal. He put it out there. And he's like, yeah, one day I'm going to have that watch. I had a similar example. One Christmas, we had a terrible ice storm here. And so my daughter and I had to go. My grandmother was alive at that time. And she lived in an apartment alone. So we had to go and check on her. And and we were okay for power. And then she had lost power before. I was still good. So my mom came to my house because she had lost power. I know, it was like rolling around where we were. And we were doing well. And then at some point in the middle of the night, I lost power. So my mom said, okay, she was going to go to my brothers or my sisters or somewhere. And I was going to go check on my grandmother. So we got in the car and drove very slowly because all the lights were out to a town like on the way that had power. And so we could get some breakfast because I didn't want to open my fridge or freezer because so we could have some breakfast. And while we're sitting having, I think we got bagels and tea or something and juice. We sat across, we were on a bench in the mall, and there was the Pandora store just down the way. And I said to my daughter, one day, someone that loves me very much is going to buy me one of those bracelets. And I'm thinking a future boyfriend because I was single at that time. It was the first winter, Christmas after my divorce. So I said, one day, someone that loves me very much is going to buy me one of those bracelets. And that Christmas, my mother gave me one of those bracelets. And I thought, yep, I was right. Someone that loves me very much is going to buy me one of those bracelets. So that's anyway. So that's my story. And Nancy wants to know, do I journal every giveaway and try to manifest it? No, I actually don't journal my giveaways. I've been using it to focus on my business and clearing away limiting beliefs. I enter for fun. I just play with it. And I don't specifically focus on one specific prize like Helene did. To me, it's my relaxation, and I don't want to use my mental energy or my emotional energy on a specific prize. I just like to play with it and enter. You can try it and let me know how it goes. Because like I said, I'm focused right now, 5 books, 5 months. That's a big undertaking. And that's what I have been journaling. But that's the beauty of this, right? You're going to try it. I can try it later when things slow down. It's again, it's a game. It's a game. We're playing. We're having fun with it. Right? Don't ever think, that's the other thing. One last tip before I go. Don't think of it as work. The minute you're like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do, you've turned off the tap. You've turned it off. You can almost feel it. Oh, I'm so lucky I get to do this. Whew. You can feel the difference. Did you feel the difference? Oh my God, it's guys, I got to get the thing if I don't have you even across the internet, you can feel the difference and the tension between right? Just right. Okay, this is a good question. It's very long, so I'm not going to put it on the screen. It'll cut my head off. What was your favorite first SPEC story that made the light bulb go off in your head on life? I love listening to them. I think the first one, had I read Helene's book I don't know if I had read the Name and Claim It game. I might have when I might have had this edition. But one thing I did was I was entering a contest to win a trip to Australia. And there was a band Simple Plan, and you were supposed to win tickets to go see Simple Plan in Sydney. And I'm like, I'm winning that trip. And I looked it was the last day of the contest, and I said, see you guys soon. I didn't win the trip to Australia. But later that month, it was the was it 2006? Yeah, it was 2006. And the Winter Olympics were going from Torino, Italy to Whistler, BC in Canada. And Bell Canada was having contests every day for like a month, giving away a trip to the Olympic. So you'd go to Whistler and you'd be in the crowd. So when they hand the torch over, there's a bunch of people in Canada going, woo, we're getting the Olympics in 4 years, right? So I think it was the third day of the contest, and they had different activities. You had to do different things to enter. This day, you had to take a picture of yourself in the luge position, like pretend you're on a luge, which is one of the Winter Olympic sports, and submit your entry. So my ex used to be on a bowling league, and so he was out. My daughter was like 3 or 4. She was 4. I hand her the digital camera because it was a pretty good camera back then. And I mean, my phone takes way better pictures now. It's amazing, the technology. Anyway, I lay down on the living room floor and I'm like, take a picture of me. So she did. And I, had to get it downloaded and uploaded to the computer and sent off my entry. We win that trip. So we end up going to BC when they're handing the torch off. So I think the contest was in January and you went in February. Like it was like really quick. We're in BC and we got this, not like a suite. It was one of those ones where maybe they're called suites. It had like a bedroom, a fireplace, a living room, a little kitchenette, a bathroom with a huge soaker tub. Like it was amazing. Right in Whistler Village. And they had so many activities. We were wandering around. It was so lovely. And they had concerts and shows and there was restaurants. And one of the things the winners got to do was attend a concert by Simple Plan and then go and have a meet and greet with them after. So when I said, I'll see you guys later, I literally saw them later. watch what you speak because it will come true. Yeah. And I have more stories on that, but that's one of the first ones that really made me click into, because it was just so strong, right? Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. And I'm going to be doing these every month, and I hope to do them more. And I'm also going to start having interviews with guests. I'm so excited because my goal isn't just to teach Helene. My goal is to teach people how to win in life. And so we're going to bring in all the resources for you to win in life, not just Helene, because there's a lot of awesome teachers out there, which, you know, she knew too, because if you go to, if you read her book, she has a lot of people that she says, when I read this book, I read this book. If you go to Words for Winning, I put her and my recommended reading list on there. So you can go and maybe read some of the teachers that she read and that she learned from, which is kind of cool. And I hope that answers your questions and gives you more resources on how to have a winning life. Until the next time we meet.